Hello and welcome along to Matchday 32 predictions from the Honest Football Podcast. We are back for a full midweek fixture list in the Championship, but before we go and get on to those 12 games, we have got to have a quick recap of what happened last weekend. Now for me, it was 7 points, including just one perfect score, a lot of near misses, but the one I got right was my own team, Luton Town, a 1-1 draw away at Coventry City. Pretty easy to predict that given recent form of the two. But the rest of you, well, you did really well. Tony is star of the show again, 16 points with 4 perfect scores. And that's excluding the attempted cheat on the Friday night as well. 4 perfect scores on a Saturday, an incredible effort. W&G fan with 6 just behind me. And lots of others who just predicted 1 or 2 games but called them very well. So a good weekend across the board, an okay one for me. But let's see if we can nail down a few more perfect scores this midweek. And we start on Tuesday night with Birmingham City versus Cardiff. I should be fair at this point and just make something clear. I'm recording this episode straight after the games on Saturday because I'm actually going away for a few days. So as a result, I haven't seen all of the highlights as I would have normally. I'm going to be basing a bit more off stats, a bit more off recent form. But this one, for me, probably a little more cut and dry because Birmingham back-to-back wins, a very good one against West Brom on Friday. They were up for it, they were the better side, only conceded 1 shot on target very late on and were thoroughly deserving of their 2-0 win. A great free kick as well from Hannibal. Whereas for Cardiff, the woes continue. They've been poor away from home all year. At home to Borough at the weekend, they lost by 3-1. Unfortunately, in that game, despite creating a few more chances, they weren't able to have a lot of the ball. And of course, they haven't got that ruthless edge that Middlesbrough have. So in the end, it was a 3-1 defeat in spite of a better performance. And for this one, based on their back-to-back 1-0 away wins prior to that, they got battered at Leeds in the Cup, of course. I have to go for Birmingham to win at home. And I know they've had difficult days at home sometimes, but I think they'll have too much here. If they score, for me, they win their game. And that's what I'm going to go for. 1-0 to Birmingham City. Nice low-scoring start. Next up, we move on to Coventry City versus Millwall. Bound to be a tough game to predict this. Coventry, as we mentioned, drew 1-1 with Luton at the weekend. Little bit of concern for them in terms of conceding early goals, though. 3 in the first 20 minutes against Norwich, an early one after 15 against West Brom, and then in the first minute against Luton. Is something that Coventry have got to change. They were famed last year for scoring a lot of late goals, but they've got to stop them going in the other end early. A good point for them though, and Millwall back up into the playoffs. A really good win at QPR. Hard fought, gave up a lot of the ball, and were very dangerous on the counter. Duncan Watmore and Ollie Burke getting the goals. Great to see some of the signings having an impact. And that's 3 unbeaten for them now, including back-to-back away wins. Now, prior to that, they'd only won 2 away games all season. Coventry generally very good at home, just the 4 defeats in 15 games. I think this is going to be really tight. I could see it being 1-0 Coventry. I could see it being a very narrow scoreline, but I'm going to sit on the fence. It got me 3 points at the weekend. The Championship's favourite scoreline, 1-1 at the CBS. Next up at Carrow Road, we've got Norwich City versus Hull City. Norwich, of course, back-to-back defeats. The Burnley one may be a bit more expected, but away to Bristol City, a 1-0 frustrating day at the office after 2 brilliant away performances prior. And it maybe is a concern that one stat stands out. 15 shots, 1 on target, no clear-cut chances. Definitely not ruthless in front of goal. And for Norwich, who have got very good attacking players that have often done well at this level, that will be a little bit of a concern for David Wagner. No goal in 2 for them. 3 clean sheets in a row for visitors Hull City. A hard-fought 0-0 draw at Stoke, albeit both sides had one great chance to win. And Hull and QPR were good victories for them prior to that. So it's very hard to predict Hull to concede many. They're doing really well under Liam Rossini. It's actually 10th v 11th going into this game now. But given the fact that Hull City have been so solid at the back, that Norwich have been pretty toothless the last 2 going forward, I know we might get a big response, but I'm going to sit on the fence. And again, I'm going to go low scoring. 0-0 is my scoreline at Carrow Road. Let's head to the capital for the next one. It is QPR versus Sunderland. The visitors Sunderland got a brilliant late win at home to Reading at the weekend. Really crucial 3 points. And again, a game they played really well. They were the better side throughout. But without Ross Stewart, without Ellis Sims, that lack of goal threat, it is a little bit apparent to be fair. Patrick Roberts popping up with a goal this time and a thoroughly deserved 3 points. whereas QPR, another defeat, still not won since the first game Neil Critchley was in charge against Preston. And it is a really dismal run at the moment. Lots of goals going in against, not scoring more than one in a game since the Reading one. That's the only time in the last 6. It is a real concern. I'm not sure what's going wrong there, but they're down to 16th. They maybe, with extra games played, have to start looking over their shoulder a little bit. 10 points is the buffer at the moment. But for me, Sunderland away from home are so much better. They're 5th in the form table away from home overall this season. They are one of the best teams in the division on the road, and they're now only 1 point and 1 place off the playoffs. I have to predict a Sunderland win. QPR, of course, could come and show a bit of fight. We may well get the 1-1 draw that we so often see these two sides get, but I'm going to go for Sunderland to nick it, and mainly because I want a higher scoring game. I'm going to go 2-1 to the visitors. Up north next, as we move on to a big game in both the title race and the race for the playoffs. It is Burnley versus Watford, two of the relegated sides last season. The Burnley steam train continues, a 3-0 win against a Preston side that are so good away from home. Nathan Teller with a hat-trick, he was absolutely brilliant. And Vincent Kompany's side, they just don't look like they're going to be stopped. All of the ball, all of the chances. They're a super side, and to be fair, I know we've said they're going to have a bad run at some point, but it doesn't matter now. They've got a 17-point buffer. There is no doubt Burnley are going up now. In contrast to that, Watford continue to stutter. It's 4 without a win, 2 1-1 home draws in a row, albeit they came from behind against Blackburn. It did look like they were going to lose that for a while. And again, as we mentioned earlier on with other sides, giving up early goals does allow teams to just sit in against you. For Watford, they were the better side. They had a lot of the ball. They created chances throughout the match. But again, as players come back, as a lot of January signings get integrated, one of them, Wesley Hurt, getting a goal, there does need to be a bit more firepower from this Watford team. For me, Burnley can't be stopped at the minute. They're unbeaten at home. They're absolutely flying. I don't think they'll get 3 again this time, but I'm going to go for 2-0 to Burnley at home, because I could see Watford folding if they're letting the first. And the final game on Tuesday night is Reading versus Rotherham, a big one near the bottom. Despite that positive start, Reading have now slipped to 18th place and they are 9 points clear of the relegation zone. Rotherham a couple of places below them and 5 points worse off. It was another draw for them away at Blackpool. Yes, stopped the gap from being closed. It was a good point. It was a hard-fought one. There were no great chances in the game, but they managed to keep that unbeaten run going. And having played Watford and Sheffield United, they probably would have expected 2 defeats and a win, and now they've maybe got 3 draws. So the same points total overall does extend their unbeaten run to 4, and they've looked so much better at the back after their January signings. That's just 1 goal conceded during those 4 games. For Reading, a 1-0 defeat at Sunderland. They almost hung on, but Sunderland deserved their victory in the end. But we've said it all year. Reading, home and away, a very different kettle of fish. Their last 2 home games, though, have been 2-2 draws against QPR and Watford. I'm not going to predict the same this time because Rotherham maybe not quite so expansive going forward. And I think they will try and play to keep putting another point on the board. With Reading at home being so strong, I could see there maybe being a winner here. I'm going to go for one of Reading's 1-0 wins. I know they haven't had one for a while at home. I think Rotherham would be delighted with a 0-0 or a 1-1, but I'm not quite predicting them to get it. 1-0 to the hosts. Moving on to Wednesday, the first game is Bristol City versus Wigan, and I bet a couple of weeks ago, none of us expected this to be 2 form teams. Wigan Athletic with back-to-back clean sheets, 4 points out of 6 under Sean Maloney, a crucial 1-0 win against Huddersfield down there with them. They move off the bottom, they're now level on points with Cardiff with a game in hand. It's back in their hands for survival. We did say it when we did the manager special last week. I said they'd just stay up, and they're starting to look like it as well. Brilliant work he's done defensively with them. Only conceded 2 shots on target that whole game against Huddersfield. Albeit they only had 1 going forward. They can start picking up points and keeping clean sheets. Wigan are going to be alright because there's poor teams down there. For Bristol City, on the other hand, the lads are flying. They are absolutely flying. A 1-0 win against Norwich after a brilliant FA Cup win, a good win at Preston. It's now 7 or 8 unbeaten overall, including the Cups. They've been fantastic. They're scoring goals, they're looking a threat. Defensively, back-to-back clean sheets. And again, if you put these 2 sides together, I wouldn't be able to tell you the last time both had back-to-back clean sheets. It'd be a long time. But Bristol City, a really good win against Norwich. Mark Sykes with a goal, a crucial one. And to be fair, they look like they can't stop winning at the minute. But this is the problem with Bristol City. We've seen spells like this before over our years of doing predictions, and it always comes crashing back down, and it comes crashing down when you least expect it. Is Wigan at home that game? Wigan are going to frustrate them. They're not going to offer Bristol City that space in behind, and we saw earlier in the year under Liam Richardson, they can be threatening on the counter. Now, we have seen a lot of games earlier in the season where Bristol City give away possession, make mistakes at the back. I know the last 2 games wouldn't suggest it, and I'm going to apologise because Bristol City are in great form, but I just don't want to get fooled by them. I'm going for a 1-0 Wigan win. I've got a feeling that Sean Maloney's going to be able to pull this off, but Bristol City doing brilliantly, pushing their way back up into the playoff mix, and if they're winning midweek, they're well and truly in it. Next up is Preston North End versus Luton Town. It's back-to-back defeats for Preston in the league, a 3-0 defeat at Burnley. I don't think anyone was surprised they lost, but maybe the deficit is perhaps a little bit more surprising. Luton Town a 1-1 draw at Coventry. I think a lot of us predicted that. A decent start, well, a very good start, and a decent game overall. Luton keep that run in the Championship going, recovered from that cup tie in midweek, and they are the team in the better form at the moment. We've seen that Preston are very poor at home this year, second worst record in the Championship. We know they were played off the park by Burnley, but they struggled against Bristol City too. Luton will counter in a similar way. They've got 2 very good strikers up front. They're going to try and play into those 2 strikers. They're going to try and press the Preston defence, and if they do it successfully, this could be a very comfortable away win. I'm not going to predict it to be that comfortable though, because I always hate going very aggressively for Luton Town. But the 4th best away record against the 2nd worst home one, you've got to predict an away win. I'm not going to go for a big result this time, and Luton do generally concede silly goals. I know they've got the joint 2nd best away record of goals against in the Championship. Oh, I don't know whether to do it. 2-0. 2-0 Luton Town. Apologies in advance if that comes and backfires. On to another very big game at the bottom of the table. It is Stoke City versus Huddersfield Town. Huddersfield, of course, sacked Mark Fotheringham just 1 day after we recorded the last episode. They lost 1-0 at Wigan at the weekend. A big blow against a side in that mix with them. And this one is going to be just as important. Stoke, 5 points clear of the relegation zone, 6 clear of Huddersfield overall. And after a 0-0 draw against Hull City, that uninspiring 1-0 defeat at Luton, just after it looked like they were turning a corner with those big wins against Reading and in the FA Cup, it's all come crashing back down to earth. There's just no consistency in that Stoke City team. Huddersfield have been, well, consistently poor for a long time now. No win since the World Cup break in the league, I think it is. And that 1-0 defeat will be crushing. The fact that they've played so many sides whilst they were in the bottom half recently, Hull were when they played them, Coventry currently are, QPR, Blackpool and Wigan the last 2. It is a really difficult spell now, and with tougher fixtures coming up, I don't know that Huddersfield get out of it. For this one, though, is hard because you've got the worst away team in the league v the 4th worst home team. It's not going to be a pretty game. I can't see it being an exciting one, but I am going to go for Stoke City to nick it. I got that right against Reading, albeit it was more convincing. I'm going to go 1-0 Stoke City because I can see Huddersfield playing for a draw. 3 to go, and we head over to Wales next as Swansea City host Blackpool. A 0-0 draw for the visitors against Rotherham, a frustrating day. Probably a game they would have liked to have won, and after 2 home games against Rotherham and Huddersfield, they're going to feel a bit like missed opportunities, albeit in the end, the Huddersfield game ended up being a good point with the red card. For Swansea, no improvement to Russell Martin's mood. That late turnaround against Birmingham followed up with a heavy defeat of Sheffield United. The hosts were the better side in that game, and to be fair, Sheffield United away is a tricky test for anyone at the minute. But the manner of the defeat, the fact that the goals are flying in against them yet again, a 7 in 2. They've also let in 5 in the 4 prior to that. It is the same old Swansea, and we talked about it so much last year. Defensive errors, poor from set pieces, playing out from the back and getting caught. And for me, there's got to be a slight adaptation while certain players are out. Swansea are very average at home. They don't draw many though. 6 wins, 6 defeats, just the 2 draws. Blackpool, they've been draws galore in recent weeks, 2 in a row there and 5 on the road this season. But their defensive record was so poor away, and the last time we've got to judge them on is Middlesbrough, which is a really tough test. I know the Mick McCarthy bounce is there, and he will get those strikers to press the Swansea defence, and it could well go the other way. But I have to back Swansea to bounce back. They've not won since the Sunderland game, but I think they will here. Won't be easy because Swansea never make it. They won't keep a clean sheet because they very rarely do. But despite my reservations, I'm going to go for Swansea City 2, Blackpool 1. On to the penultimate game, which could have huge ramifications at the top. It is Sheffield United versus Middlesbrough, second v third with 10 points separating them. If Middlesbrough don't get a win in this one, you'd probably argue the top two are up. If they can win it, well, you might start to see a few twitches and nerves up at Bramall Lane. It was a 3-0 win for Sheffield United against Swansea, a thoroughly comprehensive victory. And the same for Middlesbrough, 3-1 at Cardiff. Didn't have quite the dominance you may have expected and relied on a third goal late on. But so much firepower, so much quality. And again, if you take out that Sunderland game with the red card and the FA Cup tie, they're the unstoppable force under Michael Carrick. 3 wins in a row for them, 8 scored, 1 conceded. Sheffield United backed up their 3-1 cup win with a 3-0 win there. I can see this game being a thriller, and I just hope that both teams don't go a little more cagey, a little more cautious and try and deal with the other's attacking threat, because this could be an absolute thriller if not. I can't back either team to win it. I know that there probably will be a winner. To be honest, I'd fancy Borough's pace up front on the counter against Sheffield United's defence. We saw even Wrexham gave them a bit of trouble with that. But Sheffield United are so good at home. The Bramall Lane crowd will get right behind them for a game like this. They've got the second best home record in the league behind Burnley. Middlesbrough aren't bad on the road, but very rarely draw. Oh, I think this is going to be one they might, though. I'm going to go Sheffield United 2, Middlesbrough 2. I still think someone will win this, but I have no idea who, so I'm afraid I sit on the fence. And the final game is West Bromwich Albion versus Blackburn Rovers. Again, a big game in a race for the playoffs, both sides just outside at the moment. West Brom were really poor at Birmingham. I'd argue maybe their worst league performance under Corberan. Certainly the one they looked the least threatening, just one shot on target near the end. Gave away a goal to a free kick and a set piece. There's not a great deal you can do. But to be fair, going forward, I've not seen that little from them since Steve Bruce was in charge. For Blackburn, it's another draw. They've become draws galore in recent weeks. That's 3 games in a row in a championship. And after not drawing for 27 games, you just knew that sort of thing was going to happen, didn't you? West Brom at home have been very good under Corberan. All of their struggles and their recent defeats have been on the road. I just wonder if they've been unsettled a little by the late January transfer work that did and didn't go through in the end. But Blackburn, I know they've had 3 draws in a row. They gave up the lead against Watford. They did play all right in the end, but they're not going to win this one. I'm going for West Brom to nick it. I think they'll bounce back. And at home, they have been so strong under Carlos. He signed a new contract, he's rejected Leeds, and they're going to celebrate it in style. I'm going to finish with a comfortable victory. I'm going to go West Brom to win by 3-1. Let's have a quick recap of what I've gone for this midweek then. Lots of low-scoring games, quite a few draws. I think the thriller of the week potentially, and the game a lot of us are looking forward to, is Sheffield United versus Middlesbrough. I've actually gone for West Brom to win comfortably, 3-1 at home to Blackburn in that last one. And I've gone for my side, Luton Town, to win away from home. Some disappointment for teams in the bottom. I'm predicting Huddersfield and Blackpool to get into even further trouble. But they're just my predictions for this midweek's action. What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. Do you agree or disagree with mine? And give me your predictions for matchday 32. Again, if you beat me, you will get a mention in the recap for the weekend predictions coming up. That episode will be here on Thursday. But if you did enjoy this one, do put a thumbs up. Subscribe to stay up to date with regular content. You can also support the show as a channel member by clicking the join button down below. But thank you very much for watching. Your support's appreciated as always. And I'll see you back here on Thursday for matchday 33.